Bom dia, obrigado pelo tempo. A gente esperou um pouquinho para ver se mais gente chegava um pouco atrasado, mas as pessoas vão entrando ao longo da apresentação e acho que podemos começar para respeitar também todos que chegaram no horário. Bom dia, obrigado pela presença. Eu sou o Ricardo Zanella, sou General Manager da Green Park Content aqui no Brasil e na América Latina. Para quem não conhece a gente é uma empresa de conteúdo que constrói hubs de conteúdos para marcas com o objetivo de conectá-las com a sua audiência. Então, a gente está sempre olhando para conseguir atrair essa audiência e uma audiência puramente orgânica. Esse ano a gente rodou alguns webinars globais, mas aqui no Brasil esse é o primeiro. A gente espera continuar com isso e vamos fazer mais alguns. E hoje, alguns dos nossos heads vão passar por esse assunto de brand publishing, the untapped opportunity, o que a gente está traduzindo meio como uma oportunidade inexplorada ou uma oportunidade oculta dentro do brand publishing, principalmente dentro do marketing de conteúdo. O webinar está dividido em 3 partes. A gente vai falar um pouco do cenário de conteúdo, vai falar um pouco do que significa agir como um publisher, que a gente fala, e também a gente vai passar por como criar conteúdos que engajem. Vou deixar os 3 heads, são os 3 panelistas, se apresentarem. Eu vou intercalando um pouco de inglês e um pouco de português, eles vão apresentar todos em inglês. É importante, embaixo tem um botão de Q&A para vocês fazerem perguntas. Por favor, mandem as perguntas ao longo do webinar. No final, a gente vai ter 15 minutos para responder. Se não der tempo de responder todas, a gente vai mandar depois para vocês também. Então, por favor, mandem as suas perguntas. I would like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves. So, Jonathan, if you'd like to start.
Yes, absolutely. It'd help if I unmuted myself. So I'm head of search at GPC. So it's my role to make sure that all our content gets to the top of Google and generates traffic and takes a bigger slice of the market.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm head of production. So I look after creating assets that can actually be used on all of our content hubs. And that can be anywhere from social assets to video, creative, and still assets.
Good morning. My name is Ian. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Green Park Content. I joined at the beginning of this year from Unilever, where I spent 24 years of my career in global brand and digital marketing roles.
So, Ian, I would like to ask you to, first of all, before we enter in, there are 3 main parts to talk about the context around the organic search opportunity.
Indeed. Thanks, Ricardo. So I think as context, my experience as a marketeer is that organic search is a misunderstood tool in the marketeer's toolbox. Sometimes it's because of lack of training, but also because it's not viewed as being as exciting as other communication channels. But our view is that it is a big treasure box of opportunity and very measurable. Put very simply, consumers tell you what they want in search and what they want more of or less of over time. It is live research. But more importantly, live sales leads to sell your brands and products. The majority of advertising hits a passive, disinterested audience, whereas search queries are made by consumers who want or need something. And marketeers should look at search, organic search, from the lens of sales, an audience of potential consumers for your products. The volumes can be huge. Across some categories, search volumes run into the billions each year. But the majority of brands only win in brand search terms. But if you look in a category, on average, 90% of what consumers are searching for is unbranded search terms. consumers wanting help, information, inspiration, or education in your category. That to me sounds like a big opportunity. And what most marketeers don't see is that winning in organic search is much cheaper than paid search, usually around 80% cheaper and sustainable for years and years. So my challenge to you as we open this session is, what is your share of search voice? If you don't know, you should. It's a critical measure of a brand's health and a key to unlock growth. So with that introduction over, let me hand to Jonathan, our head of search, to talk about changes coming in the content search landscape.
So it's worth saying that there is something of a perfect storm on the horizon. And there are a number of key challenges coming up in the next months and the next year. So for instance, many of these changes are going to relate to organic traffic. They're going to relate to paid media and your dependence on that, and how expensive that is going to become. And the trend, we believe, is going to hit brands hardest because of the way search technology and search behavior is changing and the way users are behaving. So that's the content landscape. Let's have a look at how these problems break down into specific details. So the first one to mention is the cookie problem. Now this is quite a technical challenge, and it's one which probably most of you will have heard of, but might not know exactly what it means or what the impact is going to be on your marketing effort. To cut out all the detail and go straight to a simple interpretation, what's going to happen is that paid media will become much more expensive, and it will become much less targeted as these changes take place in the search environment. Now, paid media already was quite expensive, and as an inflationary market, it goes up year on year on year anyway. But you are going to see that accelerate. And why is that? Well, it's because third-party cookies for many advertising platforms are going to get phased out. They're no longer going to be accurate. They won't be able to power your remarketing and your retargeting, which have been fantastic in reducing the cost of paid media and increasing its precision. That's going to kind of disappear. It might not affect Google's advertising platform. I mean, Google is going to make sure that some of those features still work on its platform. That means as advertisers leave other systems, other forms of, say, programmatic display, and move into the Google platform, of course, that's going to accelerate these price increases. So this is something definitely to worry about. The full effect of the change will hit by 2022, but your planning on what to do in relation to this should already be happening now in relation to the your strategy being rolled out in 2021. The next challenge is going to be technical performance. Google is continuously raising the bar on the quality it expects from not just your content, but also from your technical capabilities. And one good example of that is site speed. Google has set the bar incredibly high for site speed, which is a technical measure of how quickly your pages render in either mobile or desktop devices for users. Right now, most brand sites in the world are far, far below what Google considers to be even average performance, let alone best-in-class performance. So this is something you're really going to need to look at and tackle. At GPC, we found that sometimes it actually is easier to create a new website from the ground up than to necessarily fix existing websites. So this is quite an interesting set of questions it poses. But here are some of the key things to look at when it comes to full technical compliance with what Google's looking for. Site speed, compliance and usability, the seamless indexation of your website, privacy concerns, schema and the coding behind them, having a well-coded lean content management system with very agile processes, mobile readiness, and being compatible across browsers. So these are all come into that header of your, I would call it technical perfection that you need to achieve in order to perform in search. Let's have a look at the next slide. Now, the third part of this perfect storm is voice search. Now, voice search is something that has been, people have been talking about it now for a couple of years. It was supposed to be the next big thing, and it hasn't quite taken off in the way people expected. In fact, many homes now have voice-activated devices in the home, but people's usage of those is still confined to certain areas, like looking for songs, maybe recipes, etc., answering particular questions. It hasn't fully embedded itself into search landscape. However, you need to stop thinking about it just as this sort of silo, as it were, of search behavior. What Google has been doing is using voice search as an experimental platform. It's been introducing its so-called semantic artificial intelligence into voice search before it makes its way into other parts of search technology. And why is that really important? Well, our analysis of voice search shows that the results for page 1 can be up to 80% different than the results that are being shown on google.com on a desktop, for instance. Research also shows that people are 26% more satisfied with the results of a voice search query than a traditional query. Now, Google is all about satisfying its users, so you can guarantee that these innovations will make their way in traditional search over the next 1 to 2 years. Why should brands be worried about that? Well, also the data shows that brands on average rank 6 positions lower in a voice search result than they do in the current .com or mobile searches that you're familiar with. 6 positions might not seem a lot, but on page 1, that might make the difference between getting 34% of all the clicks and getting less than 1% of clicks in some instances. So this really is something to worry about. And I think in the last slide, we just recap these. So search results are increasingly driven by structured information. That's why schema and technical SEO are incredibly important. Brands are struggling for visibility. This is set to get a lot worse with voice changes and the other changes taking place. Paid media is going to lose its precision. So your kind of plan B or your insurance plan, that's no longer going to be valid. You can sort of ditch that because paid media is going to be less targeted and much more expensive. The other question there is if something like paid media is less targeted, you run the risk of annoying your customers by badgering them with adverts, by harassing them with adverts, and when you lose that precision. So this is something to be aware of. And then fourthly, the technical requirements are going to become increasingly challenges for, let's say, old style, large content management systems and big technology stacks. They're just not going to be able to meet the criteria for performing in this new world of search.
Thank you, Jonathan. Very insightful, also quite worrying, a journey into some big changes taking place that will affect brands and the content landscape. And in particular, brand marketeers, we believe, need to take action or be squeezed out of search progressively. Now, let's talk a bit about acting like a publisher. And what is brand publishing, how to identify the opportunity, and then the strategy to deliver it. In reality, owning consumer data has always been a challenge for FMCGs who are divided away from the consumer by retailers or wholesalers. That's going to get worse. And that's why we think organic search is a great opportunity to connect and build data. Because if you get the right strategy and execute it well, the opportunities are very big. And the key is to act like a publisher. So let's have a quick look at what brand publishing means identifying the opportunity, the strategy, and into production. The Google algorithm likes sites that give people what they need. So publishers and e-com sites do well. Being a publisher means, above all, being audience first. As brand marketeers, we think brand first. It's in the middle, it's integrated into our thinking from the very first day that we can't even see it. And in many situations, brand-centric thinking is an asset because it makes the brand manager a passionate ambassador of their brand and helps create single-minded communication, but not in organic search to the 90% of category searches that don't include a brand mention. Here, you need to be audience first and user-led. That means commissioning articles, writing articles about topics that your category audience is interested in and are searching for. It doesn't mean your brand can't be mentioned, but your brand is not the focus of the article. It's secondary. These articles need to be authentic, written in an editorial tone of voice that is believable, as if you were a magazine or a newspaper. Because writing that is staged or corporate or too pushy on the brand, consumers will see through that and not read it. So these articles also need to be published frequently and consistently. That's what publishers do, and that's what Google likes. It's always on in marketing language. But always on remains a struggle since we as marketeers think quarterly still. And this is why, as an agency, we often get asked to set up editorial teams for clients who write without the need for sign-offs across the year, keeping within the guardrails of what can and cannot be said. So frequency of publishing, consistency of publishing are important. And finally, the writing has to be engaging. We have expert writers who are expert across different categories and industries, and they can write articles that keep people reading. And if you want to take a look at this in practice, check out All Things Hair, a very successful brand publishing site that we run for Unilever, where consumers spend a long time reading each article. But what's the path to becoming a brand publisher? Well, first, you need an assessment of the opportunity at a category search level. What is the category from a search perspective? What keywords, topics, themes does it include? What is primary and what is secondary? Who is searching? What type of consumer demographic? And what lies behind the actual search requests being made? What is the intent? How large is the category in volume? And where is there high competition or low competition? And how well is your brand performing? This insight at a category level shows you where the opportunity is to perform better in organic search. It also shows whether it is better to have a standalone content hub like All Things Hair or a better publishing presence on your brand.com. And this then defines the taxonomy that we decide to deliver against. Critical in this phase is modeling the investment needed and the performance to be expected. We are able to model the number of articles you need to produce at a certain and the cost of that to deliver certain levels of traffic across months, quarters, and years. So that's the first phase. The second phase is to define the overall proposition and platform that will deliver on that opportunity. Because if we talk about a separate content hub, it means designing branding routes, naming, logo as part of a visual identity, and making sure we test concepts. And then after that, either upgrading the functionality and speed of your brand.com or building a new content site. And then thirdly, into production and publishing, always on, which will include content production, but also management of the website, email newsletter programs, and of course, reporting on performance. It's important to state that the outcome of this first opportunity assessment may not be that a separate content or publishing hub is the best route forwards. Content can also be housed on different types of platform. Brand.com can be transformed into a content hub that is more user-led. There are some barriers to this usually. One is brand-centric thinking and internal restrictions. The other is that many big brand websites are on slow IT platforms. And to win in search, as Jonathan said, you need to be on a very fast site. So where there is a big enough opportunity, a content hub can be the preferred option with a comprehensive user-led taxonomy and a fast underlying platform. And that can be run at arm's length from you as a client or managed closely, depending on your preference. And then the third and final type of content platform is usually a direct-to-consumer e-com hub, well regarded by Google since it provides both information and e-commerce. So to recap on this section, organic search starts with the strategy starts with an objective assessment of the category. Content needs to be led by user intent, and acting like a publisher means new capabilities for brand owners, and that's how you deliver on the organic search opportunity. Now let me hand across to Kate, our head of production.
Thanks, Ian. So really where production comes in is we very often get asked the question around developing content hubs is the technical components that happen at the start can be quite scientific and quite data-based. But we also know, and as Jonathan mentioned, it's really important that content is incredibly engaging and that it pulls people in. And the reason for that is that you obviously want people to spend more time within your site and within your hub. So how do we actually then start to bring creativity into a process that is very data-led up until this point? Where we really start to kind of look at things is we know that SEO will bring people to your site. That is never up for debate. And obviously doing the whole category assessment and identifying those opportunities is where we look to grow into. What we do know is that when people get to your site, we want them to stay there for even longer. We want them to engage with your site. We want them to spend time there. And it's really important that you need more than just articles in that case. So the articles and the text will get people there through search, but it's the creative assets that actually tend to keep them engaged, keep them scrolling, and really get them to interact with you a lot more. And that's why it's really important that creative is considered as part of these content hubs that we do develop. A couple of examples, because I am a visual person and we like to show off how this works in practice, is the Adobe Create website. So Adobe obviously sell a lot of kind of creative suite products that help creative industries design video, design assets, put together imagery. What is amazing though is that they've created multiple hubs that cater to those individuals that buy their product. There is no hard sell here. They show off the incredible work that these creators actually make from their products. So Adobe Create will speak to various illustrators, photographers, and video editors, talk around their workflow process, for instance, talk around the examples that they can actually share within the process, how they get there. And they've even been very kind of on trend in the last few months, talking around work from home process, how that's affected creative industry, on a technical level in terms of dealing with assets, but also how you stay fresh creatively. All of this content wraps up beautifully into this particular hub that is visited on a regular basis. Through this hub, they can collect a lot of data around the people that are actually using their products as well. When it comes to actually planning out the creative at the start of developing the content, it's really important that we identify a couple of parameters for this content. We don't just jump into writing reams and reams of copy and stuffing in keywords. That's sort of this very outdated concept of SEO. We like to look at where is there a gap in the market for the writing style and the tone of voice that we actually want to bring in? What is the personality that your audience is actually looking for and they identify with? And then we start to delve more into the nuances. So what are the cultural references that they understand and they have an affinity to? What are the other kind of brands that they're following? What are the experts whose opinions they really value? And how do we start to align your brand with those so that they actually matter in the content that we create. And then, of course, we start to look around the video, the imagery, and the design that will all really attract and talk to the target audience for the content that we're actually creating. Birchbox is an amazing example of this as well. They are currently in the States and in the UK. They predominantly are an e-commerce site selling beauty products, but they create a lot of beautiful content that is very relatable for the people that buy these products. They create wonderful newsletters, amazing social content, and all of this comes together on their website. So it appears more as a publisher site than an e-com site upfront. A lot of the times when you're searching for makeup or hair solutions, you'll often be led to their site and articles that they have created, which in turn lead you to product and ultimately conversion. There's a couple of really important factors that we need to consider when creating assets as well. Engagement is one of them. So we use creative assets to enhance the engagement on a site. So what that means is we'll increase people's time that they actually spend on their site. So the sort of time period will hopefully be a lot longer than if they were just visiting a single page with text. It would also improve their scroll depth. So really setting out a page with assets in a way that encourages them to keep scrolling and keep consuming content below the fold of the page, and also a chance to interact with the content. So playing a video, filling in a poll, possibly downloading certain things, or converting through an email sign up. A great example of this is Red Bull. So one of my favorite sayings about publisher brands is that Red Bull was an energy company, energy drink company, but now they're actually a media publishing house that happens to sell an energy drink. And I think this is true if you look at their absolute involvement, particularly in extreme sports. It's very difficult to find content that isn't somehow been touched by them. Their hubs bring all of this together in a really exciting way. They have lots of different kinds of creative assets that are all positioned into one place. And the imagery and the branding really comes through a lot. And it really, the different sizes, the different kind of flow that they have on the pages encourages you to keep scrolling down that page. In terms of the second item that we look at, we really want to build loyalty. So what loyalty means in a website sense is that we want people to stay on the site longer, like we mentioned, but we also want them to consume more than one page. So you'll be familiar with bounce rate, and obviously the higher your bounce rate, people are just coming in and bouncing out of your site after the first page. And this is often the case with query-led search content. So we use creative assets and different creative mechanisms throughout a site to convince people to continue their journey within the site. I particularly love La Creuset for this. They have an incredible recipe section. They don't have a hard sell on any of their products, but obviously a lot of the beautiful lifestyle imagery that they have on their site here includes their products. So they will mention that for this particular mac and cheese, you need to use a 20 centimeter dish. Obviously pictured here, and you can purchase it. But what is amazing with this as well is that you can sign in, you can create your own online cookbook, you can download your recipes and print them on recipe cards that are specially designed. So they create a whole experience and a whole community for the people that really love their products and the people that really love spending time in the kitchen. Of course, it doesn't hurt that they are absolutely beautiful images on top of this, and there is an amazing amount of consistency in the way that they've created thousands and thousands of assets on their site. The last thing that we really look at is shareability. So creating content that encourages people to share it, that they want to share this with their friends, they want their family to read these same things. And one way to do this, and one way we work with this, is working with influencers. So influencers can be an amazing opportunity to create brand advocates or ambassadors for your brand that really believe in your product and your vision. There's different ways to do this. So kind of creating a social squad of regular people you work with, creating a program where you're rotating in and out new influencers all the time. But what is amazing is that brands that can take influencers aid them in creating content and then bring it back into their own hub, as opposed to just leaving it on the influencer's social media profile. Makeup.com, which is owned by L'Oreal, do this really well. They work with influencers, they provide them with the products, and they create a lot of beautiful content creating this. And then they actually bring that influencer's content back into their own social channels, but also their own websites, and like create this look yourself, for instance. And that kind of loyalty of the actual brand influencer or social ambassador then gets transferred onto your website, which is quite incredible. So just to recap, we obviously know that content hubs require this appropriate blend of editorial and creative. The editorial will get them there, but the creative is what will make them stay for longer. It's important to define what the persona of your content is. We're not just looking at reaming out tons and tons of articles, but creating the persona that people can actually relate to in your brand is really important. And this is quite different often from brand tone of voice. Brand tone of voice can be quite specific, whereas this needs to be a lot more soft and a lot more conversational in a lot of instances. Creative assets drive a lot better engagement. So we know we can get people to convert if they can engage, and creative assets often allow and dictate that process. And of course, loyalty and shareability doesn't happen with editorial alone. We need to create these creative atmospheres that people want to be involved with and want to come back to in time.
Thank you, Kate. So let me close before we do Q&A to summarize the reasons why brands should act like publishers to drive organic search more successfully. Publishing drives higher quality traffic for your brand because consumers are seeking it out. They want to be there because they've been searching for it, rather than passively receiving advertising they didn't ask for. That's a massive benefit. And our analysis shows that engagement levels are around 4 times higher than purely brand-led articles. This traffic also has huge media value in paid media equivalents, at least 75% lower cost if you look at the cost of running the platform and the traffic it generates versus the equivalent cost of paid media. By utilizing the first-party data on site visitors, you can also drive massive retargeting media efficiencies, because you can also get to much sharper targets than you would otherwise be able to buy if you didn't have first-party data to retarget. And given the lack of access to third-party cookies that is coming up shortly, brands are going to need to have that first-party data in order to do this retargeting efficiently. So that hungry and targeted audience is the perfect environment to introduce your brands, and it can drive brand consideration and purchase intent more successfully than a pure brand site. They also bring consumer data at a category level in the form of first-party cookies and email data and insights on what consumers are searching for. Most brand owners who are not e-com businesses have limited first-party data, so this is a big competitive advantage. A performance-led publishing approach is always hunting for what consumers are searching for and giving them answers to that. It's live research, and you can bring that insight back into the organization to influence areas like innovation or new product development. And then finally, if we talk about standalone content hubs, when you get to a certain scale of traffic, which you can do very quickly, they can be monetized. Next to direct e-com, monetization has 3 key angles, but often a combination of these makes sense. The first is branded content partnerships, where you sell your audience that you've built to other brands by creating content for them and putting them on your platform, such as big platforms do like Cosmopolitan. The second is pure paid display advertising, so carry advertising on your content hub. And the third is affiliate marketing, links by which you then make money from the commission of the product sold when the consumer clicks out and buys. But if I take a big step back and reflect on, my experiences as a brand marketeer in Unilever, my personal view is that as an industry, we've not yet scratched the surface of the brand publishing opportunity. We still produce too much generic advertising that is ignored by consumers and doesn't connect or engage. Done correctly, brand publishing gives brands the opportunity to do just that: connect, engage with a willing audience, and help make your brand famous, building a huge value in media and data. But because it's audience-led rather than brand-led thinking that leads to this, it needs leadership from marketeers. And as Jonathan so clearly explained earlier, with this squeeze on brands coming from Google, now is the time to act or lose search relevance for your brands. Back to you, Ricardo.
Thanks a lot for all of you. Very inspiring key messages. So we are open for a few questions. We have a few minutes yet. So the first one, it's regarding, I think you just say like the whole objective and the whole goals of all of we presented today, like to acting as a publisher. And the question is, one of the main upsides of having a content strategy, it's having first-party data that you can use on targeting precision from other websites drop.
So I think what you mean is a kind of a search-led content, organic search-led content strategy. And if so, I agree. One of the benefits is retargeting, but don't ignore the media value of actually the audience that you get onto your site. I mean, that itself, if you look at that in paid media equivalents, you'll find that it is much more cost effective to bring organic audience in, and it lasts for years rather than being a one-off. So I think there are many advantages and many benefits. Retargeting efficiency is one of them.
Thanks, Jan. And what leads me to another question is, we know with acting like a publisher, we can get a lot of data. That's what we are seeing, things here in other projects. So I have a few questions about what to do or what's the next to do with this data or with this audience.
So Jonathan, do you want to tackle that, or shall I? Or a combination of both of us?
Let's both have a go at that.
Yeah.
You want to kick off the answer, and then I'll jump in with my
I mean, so I think if the taxonomy, the keywords that you're going after are kind of broad in your category, that audience is telling you their needs. So it is actually a way of segmenting needs and understanding needs. So that is insight. And that insight can influence what your activation themes. It can influence your new product development. It can influence the direction of your brand even. So the insight is one thing you can do. That's I think a critical area. And of course, when we run these content hubs, like All Things Hair, they are always on. So each month that we will be analyzing the search trends and then setting a different focus on what we write about, what articles we create for the next month. So there's an ability to be agile in line with how consumers are changing, which I think is very important.
Perfect. And what brings another question about always on. You mentioned a few times like we need to be always on, and what exactly this means, because what's the difference? It's always on in social, it means like to invest in media all the time. What does exactly means be always on organic side?
Yeah,
I can start to tackle that one. I'm a little bit prejudiced against social media, but hopefully for rational reasons. When it comes to SEO and all things, always on, take the example of All Things Hair. We published articles 4 years ago, which are still generating thousands of visits to that site 4 years on. We might have refreshed those pages or just done a few minor tweaks to them, but essentially that investment has had cumulative ROI, which is extraordinary. That content would have paid for itself within 1 year or less, and then carried on just delivering traffic. So that's really what we mean by evergreen and always on in SEO. The challenge with social media is it's a much more immediate, emotional medium, and it's much more to do with lifestyle questions. Trending things, I will dare say it's sort of slightly more superficial things. People don't go to social media necessarily to have their questions answered. They don't go to look for experts. They don't look to buy something on social media. It's a lot more, I would say, sort of maybe lightweight and to do with emotions and sort of cultural things that are going on. But if you produce a piece of content in social media 4 years ago, is that going to be still delivering traffic for you today? The chances are practically zero. Social is here and it's gone, and you don't get that long-term ROI.
Yeah. I mean, social is a paid media channel for the main. I mean, there are the lucky few that can build organic audiences, but for the main, it's paid media and one-off. Whereas always on for editorial, always on for organic means you have writers who are employed, full-time or part-time across the year, and they are continuously writing articles that are relevant to the keywords that people are searching for, and also would be introducing your brand. That's what it tangibly means, always on.
Perfect. And what brings in a new question to Kate, like, we know always on means a certain number of content every month. So we are talking about articles and different formats. And how is the best way to balance, Kate, the quantity of tests on articles and imagery and videos that you mentioned that's so important to engage? But of course, that more engaging means a little bit more cost because a video is expensive than an article. How to balance this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a number of ways that we go about it. Being a very performance-led agency that extends into our production capabilities. So we work quite closely with the SEO team to understand where creative assets will actually lend themselves to better page ranking. So what that means is that the SEO team will take quite a hard look at which pages really need creative assets to start bumping them up in the rankings and make them more relevant for our actual target audiences. That starts to allow us to prioritize which pages really need creative assets and which ones would benefit from it. We can then compare it against search trends and past history, for example. We can look at upcoming events where the content might be relevant, and then we can start to kind of ascertain how many assets actually need to be created. The other thing is that typically looking at production in agencies, a lot of people expect very large budgets for very high-end commercial sorts of production. At GPC, we try to scale that back in the sense that we still offer very high quality production, but we try to get as many variable assets out of a shoot that we can in a process. So we know if we have a day of shooting video, we can also bring in a photographer, for instance, at not a huge additional cost to also collect still assets. From still assets, we can make social assets, we can make stop motion clips. So at the end of the day, while we have had one shoot day, we would have collected multiple assets out of it. The other thing that we really look at is creating assets that have a longevity to them. So they're not necessarily fly-by-night social media assets that will get posted and can't be used again, but we'll look at assets that can work across a range of markets. if it's featuring a particular product, we might swap the product out so we can show an Argentinian and a Mexico product at the same time and switch them out. So we can edit multiple assets for multiple markets out of a single shoot. So there's no short answer, but we do use quite a data-led approach to figure out what the most affordable and cost-effective solution is for a brand within the resources they have.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. And another question that pops me up here on the audience, it's not an easy answer, but I would like to listen your point of views. Like, is it more relevant to create a content hub within my brand website or externally, 100% unbranded?
Well, it's a very good question. So some brand sites technically are slow, and that's if you can't speed them up because it's sitting on a big enterprise system, that's one of several arguments of having a standalone content hub. The other is that by having a standalone content hub, you can create a tone of voice and a personality that Kate mentioned earlier, which is really right for consumers. It's user-led rather than purely brand-led. So, that environment will be more persuasive and interesting probably for consumers than strictly within the brand, the brand guidelines. But, and of course, where you have multiple brands, so some companies have like 4 or 5 brands within one category. That's also an argument for a standalone content hub. But it is possible to create publishing within a brand.com. And, we'd be happy to discuss your brand and give a view on that. It's perfectly possible, but you've got to make sure that the technical performance of the site is fast enough and that you have the ability to write like a publisher would and not purely how a brand would.
Yeah, actually in Brazil, we have another example that we did it is on Danone Babe website. It was very well performed also. And I think the last one, because of our time, it's how to handle expectations about organic versus paid or organic and paid in this immediate environment where stakeholders want quick results. So how to handle these expectations?
Yeah, I mean, organic search, and Jonathan knows more about this than I do, it pays back, it starts to pay back within a sort of a 3-month plus timeline, right, Jonathan?
Yeah, it especially if it's on a new domain, it can take a while to get going. So let's say in months 1 to 6, ROI from paid media probably looks better. But the long-term ROI from 6 months onwards, it very quickly outstrips paid media once you get into that sort of second half of a 12-month content project. And then in year 2, the ROI is just so far above PPC that it's sort of fairly crazy. And it's worth noting that this question ties up very much with the previous question. The speed with which your content will get in front of the users partly depends on where you build it. If you build it on a brand.com, it may have the advantage that site is already mature and known to Google, but it may have the disadvantage that the content is buried quite deeply down. Users and search engines have difficulty finding it, and it may be that your platform is really kind of slow. So there's a potential advantage and a big disadvantage in putting that on a brand.com. The challenge there is that site might never improve. So you might have a long-term issue with how it grows on your brand.com. If you create a platform from scratch, it will initially take longer for that to mature, and you need to put work into your content, your links, your design, and all these things. Well, once that's done, then pretty much the sky is the limit, and you won't have some of those same restrictions that you have on a brand.com for its expansion and growth long term. So it's a complex set of considerations.
Yeah, I think it's much more related to we are running a marathon and not a 100 meters run, right? So I think that's it. We are running on time. So I'd like to thank you all for this incredible presentation, and thank you for all the audience. Thanks to join us, and we will have a new one very, very soon. Thank you all.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.